Okay, so let's start. So the first thing we'll have to learn about is why economics is considered a social science. Okay, so if you click down this, you can see that a social science is defined as any branch of academic study or science that deals with human behavior in its social and cultural aspects, as defined by the dictionary, the Britannica Dictionary. Okay, the link's there. So the fact that it's related to human behavior makes it a social science as opposed to a natural science. Okay, and we're soon going to learn that economics studies the behavior of the owners of scarce productive resources, as they must make choices and decisions regarding how they allocate their resources. Okay, so decision making obviously is a human behavior, therefore economics is considered a social science. Uh, there are two main branches. So we've talked about decision making. Microeconomics studies the behavior of individuals and firms in making decisions, whereas the macro branch studies the performance, structure, behavior, and decision making of the economy as a whole. Okay, so these two branches will become clear and distinct as we go through the course. We'll skip the 9 key concepts of economics and we'll save that for another video. Okay, so now we move on to the problem of choice. Okay, so if you're going to make a decision, another word for a decision obviously is a choice. So what are these choices, or what are you choosing between? So in economics, you study the choices made by the owners of factors of production, which are limited. Okay, but what are these factors of production? So they come in 4 categories. Okay, first one is land. Now, this factor refers to natural resources needed in production, include such things as rivers, lakes, coal deposits, timber, etc. So all natural resources, all raw materials, okay, oil for plastics, all metals, etc. Then we have number 2, which is labor, which is what I am. I am a labor resource for our school, and this is defined as a factor, as a human resource rather, needed in production, such as factory workers and doctors, and obviously teachers as well. Okay, so we do the physical labor. Okay, capital, unlike its finance definition in economics, it has zero to do with money, and it has to do with like man-made aids or tools used in the production process. Okay, often referred to as capital goods, and usually when you combine these with land and labor, you can produce some output. So any machinery, an example at school could be the large photocopiers, okay, the desks, the projectors, etc. Okay, and finally we have entrepreneur, as a factor of production, or enterprise, or entrepreneurship as it is often called. Now, this factor carries out 2 functions. First, this enterprise factor organizes the other 3. So they have an idea of a business, therefore they gather land, labor, and capital and start a business. Okay. The second factor, or rather the second function that entrepreneurs carry out is the risk taking. Okay, so this is when you start a business, of course you don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future, so there's obviously, you borrow money or you use your savings, so there's always a risk factor. Okay, and you have to organize the other factors of production, and you can make something. So even down to a one-man business who starts a hot dog stall, they use natural resources, obviously the pig itself, the sausage. They use their own labor to make the hot dog, and they use equipment such as the mini oven they use. And obviously they are themselves an entrepreneur because they had the idea in the first place, and also they gathered the other factors of production to make this hot dog stand idea work. Okay, I've just got a couple of pictures here of some well-known TV shows, Shark Tank and Dragon's Den, which are examples of when entrepreneurs present their ideas looking for investments. Okay, so it's well worth watching. Okay, now, as I mentioned earlier, we talk about these resources are scarce. There's not enough. They are limited. Okay, so this brings us to the problem of scarcity. So this term refers to the problem that arises when an economy's scarce or limited productive resources are unable to satisfy the unlimited wants of its population. And this problem is often referred to as the economic problem. Okay, so again, nothing too difficult here. Literally, we do not have enough stuff, enough productive resources to satisfy everyone. Okay, it's very simple observation in the world, but the term to describe this is scarcity. Okay, and obviously because of scarcity, we have a subject called economics, which deals with how the owners of these limited productive resources make decisions about how to allocate them. Okay? Another concept you're going to learn about later is called opportunity cost. And obviously, following on from our definition of scarcity, you can see how this situation compels owners to make choices, right? About which goods to use their resources to make. Obviously, you can't make good X without giving up good Y. You can't do two things at once. Similarly, I myself cannot be teaching economics in OFS and simultaneously be working in McDonald's at the mall opposite. Okay, so there's always something you have to give up. Another word for give up is forego. Okay, and that is called the opportunity cost. Yeah, so this foregone option can therefore be considered the cost paid for making a decision. In other words, the cost of choosing to use the scarce resources to produce good A is not using these scarce resources to produce good B. Okay, so this cost, good B, is referred to as the opportunity cost, like the second thing you would have used that money for if you hadn't done it make your first choice. So a good example would be, what is the opportunity cost of using the plot of land in Singapore to build OFS? You could say the opportunity cost is not building the highest valued second option for that piece of land, which could possibly have been a hospital. So if someone asks you what's the cost of OFS, in economics you'd say, oh, the cost of having OFS is not having another hospital. Okay? Okay, nearly there. Okay, so all this decision making basically comes down to three questions that need to be answered. So you have to make three decisions in every economy, right? So the first one is what to produce. Okay, so this refers to things like decisions related to should we make goods or services, how many, which ones are the most important, which ones are the least important and we should give up. Okay, so these decisions all have to be made and they come under the heading of what to produce. So every economy ends up answering this one way or the other. Two, how to produce these goods. Now, ideally, as these resources are limited and wants are plenty, we ideally want to satisfy as many wants as possible. Therefore, we need to use the resources in the least wasteful manner, okay, or the most efficient way. Therefore, questions raised include which production method is best? Should we use a labor-intensive method, capital-intensive methods, etc.? Okay, and the whole goal is to make it as much as possible, resulting in the least waste. Okay, we'll talk more about this later. And finally, we need to talk about who actually gets the output. So you're making stuff, but who actually gets to consume it? Okay, let's be honest. I work for a school, but I'm not consuming what the school produces. I'm just a worker for it, right? I get a salary and I use that to buy things I want to consume, right? Anyway, so this question concerns how many of each person's wants are to be satisfied and who gets to have their wants satisfied. So should we give it to the highest bidder, for example? So in Singapore, obviously, most things are, if you want stuff, output, you have to pay for it. So it's based on a price system, right? Obviously, you can have examples where output is given to women and children first, or some form of rationing. You know, old people first, first come, first serve, etc. Non-price rationing. Uh, Another consideration is should you be able to keep what you produce? And what would be the repercussions if you couldn't? Would you work hard if you knew you wouldn't make any profits out of it, for example? Anyway, so these three questions always occur in an economy, right? And must be answered in some way or the other. And then that leads on to who answers these questions, okay? So the economic systems, right? So the first one is called a free market economy. I mean, as the name suggests, this means there's no government, okay? So in a free market economy, the households and the firms, so the households are the owners of the factors of production, so like me, and the firms, OFS, are the main owners of productive resources. Therefore, the three economic questions are answered without government intervention. It's purely up to us to make decisions, okay? So what to produce? Again, most developed economies in the world have a large free market sector, okay? And what to produce is determined actually by the consumer's demand, okay? They guide the producers about how to allocate their productive resources through their demand and willingness to pay. So you think about all these new products that get developed, most of them are developed as a result of market research where they've discovered there's demand for these products by the consumer, okay? Therefore, what to produce is not decided by the government directive. It's actually decided by consumer demand, and obviously the firms who wish to make a profit will just follow what consumers want, so they can make money, right? The question of how to produce is determined by the private sector firms, and because it's all about maximizing profit, usually they will decide to a method which minimizes waste, right? So they can make more money. Keep your costs down means you can make more profit, right? So they will always try to pick appropriate production methods based on profit maximization, be it replacing labor with machinery or vice versa, whatever's best, okay? And finally, when it comes to who actually gets the stuff, again, most things in, especially consumer goods, are based on a price system in which a price is set, and if you're willing and able to meet that price, you will be able to get the good to consume, okay? Obviously, that has its merits in terms of spurring on people to work hard. However, not everyone can afford goods, okay, and they go without. So depending on the good, it can be an advantage or a disadvantage, right? The next type of economic system is a planned economy. Again, as the name suggests, everything is already planned out by the government. What to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce is determined by the government. We've seen the old Soviet Union, where the government orders farmers, producers to produce X amount. Okay, we've seen it's called a centralized decision making rather than listen to the consumer's wants. So yeah, that didn't go too well, did it? Eh? And in terms of for whom to produce, again, it's not based on who can pay the most. It's other factors. Okay, so we call that non-price rationing. Okay, but as we know, a lot of this didn't give an incentive to producers. Therefore, there were many shortages. So really, the whole system doesn't really work. And then we get to the final economic system, which is a mixed economy, which is 99% of all economies in the world run like this, where you've got both a free market and a planned system working together, not 50-50. Usually the private sector is much bigger than the public sector. Public sector being the sector run by the government, so that would include the education and healthcare sector. Okay, we talk more about that later on why it's necessary. And obviously the private sector is owned by private owners. So OFS would come under private sector. Okay.